Math 3, Unit 7, Section 1. Today we're talking about circles. Okay, so we know a circle has a radius. If you write here, it's from the center to any point on the circle. And so you could draw a radius anywhere within the circle, okay? Now, you can find the radius by using the distance formula. And this is going to come into play here later on in this unit. But if you have 2 points, so I have a point on the center and I have a point on the circle, I could find the radius by using the distance formula. Okay, and you use the distance formula back in math too. Okay? Now, a circle, the standard form, and actually we normally call this descriptive form, is right there. So I'm going to just add here descriptive form. Very good. What is descriptive form? Well, descriptive form, when your circle is written in this form, makes it very easy to graph. So right here, these two values, they give you your center, which is written right here. Center is h comma k. So see whatever is with the x value, if we set that equal to 0, you would get h. And with the y value, if you set that equal to 0, you would get k. So just like how we find our vertex when we're dealing with parabolas and stuff like that, when you have a circle, if it's in this form, you have your center. So whatever's with the x, you set that equal to 0, that's the x value of the center. Whatever's with y, you set that equal to 0, and that gives you the y value of your center. Does that make sense? Okay. At the end, see how this says r squared? So if you wanted to find the distance for r, what would you have to do to that? Yeah, just take the square root of it. And then, so then you'd be able to draw your circle because you would have your center and then you would have your radius by just taking the square root of the value at the end. Okay, so now we're going to move into some problems. Okay, this says, write the equation of the circle with the information given. The circle is shifted from the origin. Now, what does origin mean? Very good. The origin is at 0, 0. So if we're looking at a coordinate plane right now, the origin is right there in the center. And it says that it is shifted 4 units left and 6 units up. So if we start at 0, 0 and we go 4 left and 6 up, we have a point right there. What is that center? What would be this point right here? Like as an ordered pair, what is that point? Very good. -4, 6. And then it also tells you right here that it has a radius of 7. Okay, so we're going to write the equation. If we go back up here to our descriptive or standard form of a circle, what value would go with the x? If when the center, when it comes out, the x value is -4, what would go inside? Very good, +4. So x plus 4. And notice here that it says squared. Plus, what would I have to put with the y in order for when it comes out to be a +6? Yes, this is our descriptive form right here. So remember that we set it equal to 0. Exactly. Okay, so what's going to go with the y? Y -6 squared. Because when we set that equal to 0, when we take the opposite of -6, that becomes a +6. Is everybody okay with that? And then it said the radius is 7. Well, what are we supposed to do to the radius? Square it. So I'm just going to write this as 7 squared for your notes. So when you go back and look, you know how you got the answers. So the final answer I'm going to write is x plus 4 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals 7 squared, which is 49. And there is your equation for that circle. Are there questions? Okay, next one. This circle is shifted from the origin. So again, it's at 0, 0 right now. And it's going 1 unit right and 3 units down. Is this your answer? Yeah, they just want the equation of the circle. So that's all we had to do. Okay, same thing on this next one. They just want the equation of the circle. Okay, I'm going to give you about a minute to try to write this equation for this next problem. If you have the answer, raise your hand and I'm going to check it. Okay, I'm sorry I can't make it around to everybody. So I am going to pull stick for the x part of the equation, if somebody can help me please. And so the x part of the equation, he's in another class now. And she just went to the bathroom. She has to come back and answer a question now. Okay, Erin. I'm not lying. See, it's there, right there. Okay, what is the x part of the equation? What do you have?
It's going to be x minus 1 squared.
Perfect. X minus 1 squared is correct, because when you're going right 1, this would give me 1 here for my center, but it's the opposite of what's in there. Okay, so the y part of the equation, Caitlin. Very good. Y plus 3 squared, because it's going down, so that's going to make it a negative 3, but in the parentheses, it has to be the opposite. Equals, and then what did you get for the radius, Kobe? What did you get? 20. I agree. How many of you didn't get 20? Which is totally okay. Okay, so how do we get 20? Going backwards, our radius, x minus 1 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 2 root 5 squared. We talked about this last unit, so hopefully you remembered it on your test, but if not, this is what you do. When you have this squared, this is a monomial, it's a single term, so we have to square everything in here. So you would be squaring the 2, and what is 2 squared? 4. And you square root 5, and when you square root 5, what does that make? 5, and then you multiply that together, so 4 times 5 makes 20. Okay, is that better? We good? Okay, so this is my answer. Okay, next one. It says, is the point 2, 4 inside, outside, or on the circle? So I'm going to explain a few things to you. In fact, let's kind of just draw a picture real quick. What would the center of this circle be? Negative 2, positive 3. The radius would be the square root of 17. And you're going to get some square roots that are not exact. And so you can use a calculator to give yourself an estimate of what it is. So if I do the square root of 17 that is approximately 4.1. Everybody okay with that? All right. So if I'm drawing this, and I go left 2, up 1, 2, 3, make a point. When you're drawing your circle, you're going to go about 4 in each direction in order to draw your circle. So I would go right 1, 2, 3, 4, down 1, 2, 3, 4, left 4, and up 4. Okay, then you can draw your circle. Okay, so far so good? Now, this point 2, 4. If you go right 2 and then up 4, it looks like it might be in the circle. Would you guys agree? But because I am not an amazing drawer and I'm not always accurate, I'm not 100% sure. Okay? So, anybody have a guess as to how you could tell if something's, what would you do mathematically to figure out it? Anybody just have a guess, because I haven't told you anything. Very good. Okay, so these are x and y values, right? And so if we took these x and y values and put it in the formula, we could maybe figure something out. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you is that you are exactly correct. If it is inside the circle, okay, when you figure this out, the number on the left that you plug the values in for will be less than the 17. Okay? If you plug in these x and y values and the answer you get here on the left is bigger, if it's greater than, it's going to be outside. And if you plug it in and they equal each other, that means it will be on the circle. So basically, if you were to substitute these signs in here, that will tell you whether it's inside, outside, or on the circle. Is everybody good there? Yes. Right, so here's your equation. We are going to plug in x and y in this equation. Based on when you simplify the left side, if the number is smaller than 17, it's inside the circle. If it's bigger than 17, it's outside the circle. And if it equals 17, it's exactly on the circle. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. So let's plug in our values for 2 and 4.
How did you get the other dots to make the circle?
I just did 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's approximately 4.1 away from my radius. So from my center, I just went 4 in every direction in order to kind of draw a circle. Okay, so we're going to plug in our x and y values. And so we get 2 plus 2 squared plus, and then for y, I'm going to plug in what? 4. So we have 4 minus 3 squared. And you could put like equals 17, or we could not and just simplify this and see what the number is. Okay? So what's 2 plus 2? 4. So then we have 4 squared plus, and 4 minus 3 is 1, so we have 1 squared. And then what's 4 squared? 16. And 16 plus 1 equals 17. So, that's a 17. Okay, so since they equal each other, what do we know?
It's on the circle.
It is on the circle. So the point 2, 4 is on the circle. Okay, so same question, next problem. Again, they're asking us, is it inside, outside, or on the circle? So instead of drawing this and trying to figure out is it inside or outside, what's the easiest way to actually figure it out? Good, plug in our values. So we have x and y, and we're going to take these values and plug them in here to see what number I get. So we will write this as what? -1. Good. -1 minus 2 squared plus 0 minus 1 squared. And we're going to simplify it and see what answer I get. What is -1 minus 2? Good. -3 squared. And what's -3 squared? 9. Plus, what is 0 minus 1? -1. And what's -1 squared? 1. And 9 plus 1 equals what? 10. Since this number is bigger, what does that mean? Very good. So we're going to write that. -1, 0 is outside the circle. Could you explain that in more detail? So in your group right now, I would like you guys to talk about how you know it is outside the circle. Like thinking about the numbers, besides what I just told you. Like in more detail, how do you know it's outside the circle? Who thinks that the way you guys talked about it, your group like knows why? Who thinks that your group had a pretty good answer as to why they think this is to be true? Who talked about what I just asked you to talk about? Okay, good. All right, that's a start. Thank you. Okay, nobody wants to share. Nobody, like, based on this being 8 and this being 10, why do you think that it would actually be outside of the circle?
Bigger number to further away.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So if this is 8 and we're talking about our radius square and it's only going out to 8 and then you have a 10 in that same spot because we're simplifying and making it 10, right? It would make sense that it would be outside, it'd be past that point. And if you had a value that's less than 8, it would make sense that it would be before you got to that 8 value, right? And then equals, it would be at the same spot. Kind of make sense? Yes? All right. I want you guys to do this next one on your own. Okay? You already did it? Awesome. Perfect. So if you notice it says justify your response. We haven't really justified our response. We just justified it kind of in our words, talking out loud. But could you justify it in words based on what we just talked about? Yes, I think you could. Okay, anybody want to come up and do the problem for us? Yeah, come on up. Yeah, and then you get to get candy too.
No pressure.
Okay, so she's labeling, which I always suggest you should always label. Keep going, I'm just going to talk while you're writing. When you label things, you have less chance to make mistakes, and you won't plug in the wrong numbers. So she's plugging in 0 for x, and -3 for y. And now she's going to simplify. 0 plus 5 is 5 squared. 5 squared is 25. -3 plus 3 is 0, and 0 squared is 0. So 25 plus 0 is 25, and 25 does not equal 26. In fact, is it smaller, bigger, or equal to? Smaller. It's less than, so therefore, it is inside the circle. move over so we can see her beautiful handwriting. Very perfect. Get your candy. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, so again, because 25 is smaller than 26, it's not going to quite reach that outside part of the circle. Okay. Next part. These we are going to graph. Okay? You'll also notice that these second two examples have inequalities. What does that mean you would do when you're dealing with a graph? Okay, very good. When you have an equal sign, that's a solid line. When you don't have the equal sign underneath, it's going to be a dotted. Okay, dotted or dashed. Good. And what else do you do? You shade. So based on everything we talked about, if this says less than, where do you think you're going to shade?
Inside.
Inside the circle. If it says greater than, where do you think you're going to shade? Outside the circle. Pretty easy, right? Yes? No? Okay, now all we have to do is graph these. Okay? When you are at home, and if you have a smartphone, I honestly suggest downloading Desmos.com or Desmos app. But this is a way for you to plug in this information into a graph and check to see if you graphed it correctly. Okay, so great resource for you to double check your work. Also for you juniors, when we're taking the state test this year, they use Desmos.com. They use the same graphing system as that on the state test. So the more you play around with it, the more you're familiar will be with it, and the easier it'll be when you take that test later. Okay, so what's my center here? We're going to do this first one together, and then I'm going to start pulling some sticks. So, very good. It is -3, +5. How do you get those values? Very good. We set these equal to 0, and it ends up becoming the opposite value, so you get a -3. This is with the y. Notice how this is with the x part of the equation. This is with the y part of the equation. Okay? Now, radius. My radius is always the square root of that value. So I write that as the square root of 4, and I simplify, and the square root of 4 is what? 2. Okay, so now what we're going to do is graph that. Start by the center. We go left 3, and then up 5. There's my center. And then in order to draw your circle, you're going to go right, left, up, down 2, because my radius is 2. So we go 2 in each of those directions. And with those points now, I can draw my circle. Do I have to worry about any shading on this one? No. Why not? It's equal. Very good. Okay. Next one. Starting with my center. Very good. The center is 6, 0. And my radius, okay, and so for the radius, it's the square root of 12. How are you going to simplify that, though? I would break it down. So the exact answer is 2√3. Okay, this is that I'm teaching a lesson, so if you want that match up with you or later on, right? Because I have to teach right now. Or you go to the people, right? Like right before school starts or at lunch? Okay.
I'll come at lunch if you'll be here.
Okay. So 4 and 3, 2 and 2, a pair of 2s and a 3 left over. So that's 2√3. But does that help you with graphing?
No.
No. But on your test, if they ask you what's the radius would be 2√3. We wouldn't put it in decimal form. Okay, but in your calculator, very good. And I would just go back and I would just put the square root of 12, if you can see what I'm doing. And it's approximately what? 3.5. Okay, and so you can put approximately 3.5. So where do we always start at? 0, 0, but then from there we do our center, which is 6, 0. And then we go 3.5 every direction. And once you have your 3.5 in every direction, you can draw your circle. Questions? Okay, next one. I'm going to ask for some help, starting with my center. So please tell me what my center is, Robert. Perfect. 3, -4. I'm going to go ahead and plot that on my graph right now. I'm going to go right 3, 1, 2, 3, down 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Next, I need to find my radius. How do I find my radius? Please help me out. Aaron. Hi.
Divide the line. Square root.
Very good. Square root of 9. And what is the square root of 9? 3.
3. Oh.
Very good. Square root of 9 is 3. Because 9 breaks down to 3 times 3. We have a pair of 3's. The answer is 3. Okay, so now I'm going to go, and we're going to go 3 in every direction to draw our circle. So we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, but we notice on this one that it has an inequality sign. So first of all, going back to my circle, did I draw the line correct? Because the line should be what? Solid because of why? Good, it has the equal to sign underneath, so it's a solid line when you're drawing your circle. And this is saying less than, and we know that less than means I'm going to shade inside. So all we're going to do is just shade inside our circle, and we're done. Okay, I'd like everyone on their own to give this next one a try. Sorry. And I would love to take a volunteer if somebody ends up wanting to come up and do this for a candy. All right, so center is 0, 1. If there's nothing with the x at 0, just keep working and I'll just keep talking. Okay. And so, any questions on center? Radius, we take the square root of 25. Square root of 25 is 5. And so once you put the center, you're going 5 in all those directions. And then we have the greater than sign there. So because it doesn't have the equal to sign, we are going to have a dotted or dashed circle. Good. And then greater than means we are going to shade where? Outside of the circle. And that is perfect. Do we have any questions on any of this? Give me a thumbs up, down, in the middle, how you're feeling about this so far. So good. Okay, thank you for those of you that voted. Okay, next. This last part here, we are going to be learning how to put circles into descriptive form. But today we're just taking a piece of it and practicing part of it so that actually doing it will become easier. Okay, so there are things called a perfect square trinomial. Remember that trinomials start as 3 terms? Okay, a perfect square trinomial is where when you factor it and you get like this x plus 9 and x plus 9, because see how these both add to be 18, multiply to be 81? See how they're exactly the same? That is called a perfect square trinomial, and we would write that as x plus 9 squared. Okay, sometimes problems aren't written where they're going to make perfect squares. So we can make them a perfect square, and then we just have to end up adding something to the other side. Okay, now how this works is, just so you know, here's kind of some instructions. Finding the perfect square. Okay, first of all, you take half of b. So when your equation is set up, you have ax squared plus bx plus c. So you take half of the b value, which is half of the number that's in front of your plain x term. So if we go to the one that they already did for us here, if you take 18 and you cut that in half, what do you get? 9. Do you see how that's where the 9 is? So that's the value that goes in for your perfect square. Okay? And then you end up writing that value to make your square. Do you see that? X plus 9 squared. Now, you can't just make a square without adding something. And so the value that you're adding is the values, when you multiply these, what's 9 times 9? 81. So you end up squaring this, which is 81. And in order to make this perfect square of 9, we need to add 81 to our equation. And you'd actually add it to both sides in order to balance it. Okay, so we're going to practice this where I think it'll make more sense, hopefully. So if we want to make a perfect square here with 16, oops, let me go bigger. Okay, we are going to start by taking half of this value, our b value, which is 16. So 16 divided by 2 is what? 8. So this 8 is what's going to go in this parenthesis. So we're going to write that as x plus 8 squared. Everybody okay? All right, so next we are going to square that 8, which is what? What's 8 squared? 64. So the adding number, the number that I'm adding to both sides in order to keep it balanced, is 64. Okay? And then if you already had another number, in this case there was a negative 2 there, we would just combine those together. And what is negative 2 plus 64? 62. So that's it. That's all we're doing today, is we're going to write our perfect square and simplify the right side. Okay? Now, if you go to this next one, when I take negative 3 and I cut it in half, it doesn't simplify. Bless you. If this doesn't cut in half like this, just write it this way. X minus 3 halves. Please return back to C22. But in order to get the number that we add to both those sides, because we're doing negative 3 squared, we have to square that. When you square that, what does it become? So you would square the negative 3, which makes a 9, and you square 2, which is 4. So we're adding 9 over 4 to both sides. How do you add with fractions? Exactly. So right now this has a denominator of 1. We want it to have a denominator of 4. Okay? And so if we have to multiply the denominator times 4, we have to multiply the numerator times 4, and 1 times 4 makes 4. So you add those together, and what do you get? 13 over 4. Okay. This next one, we're not gonna do the whole thing here because we're running out of time. But when you take 3/5 and you divide it by 2, do you guys know what we would actually do? We're gonna end up with a fraction divided by a fraction. What do we do to get rid of that fraction in the denominator? You multiply by the reciprocal, which is 1/2. And so what do you end up getting? 3 over 10. Okay, so when I took a half, I got 3/10. So that means down here, this is x plus 3/10. And then what do we need to do? Square it. When you square it, what does that become? 3 squared is 9, 10 squared is 100. So 9 over 100 goes into each of these. Now you guys know that in order to add these, you have to get a common denominator. The common denominator would be 100, okay? And so when you end up adding them together, we end up getting 29 over 100. Okay, last part here. So it says rewrite the following as x minus a squared equals b. So we're going to complete the square. This is just like the previous problems except for they didn't put the blanks. So I'm going to kind of help you out. This is x squared minus 10x plus blank equals negative 2 plus blank. How do I do the perfect square? What do I do first? Negative 10 divided by 2 equals what? Negative 5. When I get that value, that's when you write your square. So what's going to be my square? X minus 5 squared. Okay, then I take that negative 5 and I do what to it? Square it, and negative 5 squared is what? 25. So 25 goes in my blanks. That's what I'm adding to both sides in order to make that perfect square. We add them to both sides in order to balance it. And what's negative 2 plus 25? 23. Okay, that's your answer. Okay, last one. Do you see how this has a number on the left? In order to make your perfect square, you want the plain number to be on the other side of the equation. So I subtract 11, and then we're going to rewrite it with our blanks. So I would write this as x squared plus 8x plus blank equals negative 11 plus blank. In order to complete the square, what do I do? 8 divided by 2, which is 4. What do I do with that 4? Write your square. So that's x plus 4 squared. What do I do to get the numbers in the blanks? Square your 4, which is, okay, and then you get combined like terms. Negative 11 and 16 makes positive 5.